plans and flight following. So flying flight plans and flight plans are two different things, but I just want to cover them all in one video. So the purpose of filing flight plans is that so somebody can know where you're going and what route you're taking to get there. So with modern cell phones, it's not as big of an issue to file flight plans, especially if you have a pilot friend. You can just let them know, or you can let whoever you're renting aircraft from know. But if you don't want to use that method, you can always use filing. The FAA offers the opportunity for you to file flight plans. So whenever you file a flight plan, there's a couple different ways. Either you can do a paper copy, so the paper copy is really just for your reference. You're really filing one over the phone. You can use a website like 1-800-Weather Brief, or you could use any other. There are numerous services out there like 4Flights and whatnot. So whenever it comes to filing flight plan, I'm going to show you first the method of filing it over the phone. So what I like to do a lot of times is I like to go ahead and print off a copy of this and fill it out myself so that I'm able to quickly reference it on the phone. So what we want to do is we can call 1-800-Weather Brief, and you can look at your your keypad for it on your phone, but it's 1-800-992-7433 is the actual phone number for that. And so it'll ask you a prompt. It'll tell you something about, okay, what do you want to do? I think option 1 is a briefer. We can hit option 1 or say briefer. Then it'll ask you what state. You can tell them Alabama if you're, whatever state applies, and then a person's going to answer. First thing you got to tell them is just, I would like to file a VFR flight plan. And they'll probably tell you, okay, go ahead. So by that point, we've already filled this out, and we would just read it off to them. So first, I'm going to talk about this, and then we'll kind of pick up with that phone call, that imaginary phone call. So type, we're flying VFR. Aircraft identification, we just fill it out, November 9160 Hotel. Aircraft type is the Cessna 172. To figure out what our special equipment is, we've got to know what the aircraft equipment type is for the plane. So what we can do is you can just know it off the top of your head. It's not going to change unless the equipment in the plane is going to change. We're equipment type G, which means we have GNSS system with a transponder with mode C. Most aircraft are probably going to be type G. GNSS is just GPS plus the Galileo and the Russian version. So it's just the European, Russian version, any other satellite systems instead of just the standard, GPS system that the U.S. Air Force created. So that's transponder with mode C. And so that's why we're equipment type G. Tracer airspeed, we'd figure that out. It's 100 knots. Departure point, wherever you're departing from. So I threw Tuscaloosa in there. Proposed departure time in Zulu. So right now, in the summer months, in Alabama, it's kind of from, I think, summertime in March all the way until sometime in like September or October, maybe a little bit later in the year. It's just going to be +5 to convert from Central to Zulu. If afterwards it's +6 in the other time frame. So right now we're just +5. So that would make our current time to be 1740 Zulu. So 1720 Zulu. So I just kind of made it so we're depart 25 minutes from now. Cruising altitude, fill that out. Route of flight, you can leave it blank if it's going to be direct. Otherwise, you can just write any points that you're going through there. So I'm just leaving it blank because we're going direct. And then we've got Selma Airport as our destination. Estimated time en route, I always add a little bit of time to whatever it's going to be just in case I get on the ground or it took a little bit longer. If I get on ground and I forget to cancel it immediately. So I just put 50 minutes there. Remarks, you can leave them blank if you have none. Fuel on board, just however much fuel you have. How long you could fly. So it's around 4.5 hours, and 172 if they have 38 usable in the tanks. Alternate airports, you can leave it blank if you don't need any. Generally for VFR flying, you're probably not going to need an alternate. So rules for needing an alternate is the 1, 2, 3 rules. So an hour before, an hour after, the forecast has to be better than 2,000 foot ceilings and 3-mile visibility. If it's worse than that, then you're going to need an alternate. Even for VFR flight, needing alternates mostly applies to IFR flying because there's probably not many cases where you're flying below that long distances because, it's just not a good idea to fly a marginal VFR for long distances. Fill out your pilot's name, fill out your phone, write out your phone number, and then whatever airport the airplane belongs to. So like in this case, it's going to be Tuscaloosa, number on board, and then aircraft color, white and gray. Who to close the VFR flight plan with, that's really just for your own personal reference. But so we can kind of pick up with that imaginary phone call. So he would say, go ahead. And we can just read it off just like this. VFR, November 9160 Hotel, Cessna 172, equipment type G, 100 knots, Kilo Chango Charlie Lima, 1745 Zulu, 3,500. Direct to Kilo Sierra Echo Mike. 50 minutes. 4 hours of fuel. Jake Mizell. Maybe we want to spell it out. Slowly say our phone number. Kilo Tango Charlie Lima Hotel home base. 2 on board, white and gray. And then he would read it back to us. So as long as we go just like that, we do not have to tell him aircraft identification and read out what it is. He knows exactly what this order is. So as long as we follow the order, it'll make sense to him. And then whenever we get to airport names, we can either say KTCL or we might have a little bit of hard time hearing you. So you can use the phonetics. So in this case, Kilo Tango Charlie Lima. In this case, Kilo Sierra Echo Mike. So you can just look up a phonetic alphabet thing to know what you need to say for that. So that is how we file a flight plan. So they would respond back, okay, they would read it all back. We'd be like, okay, that sounds good. Then they would ask us if we wanted a weather brief. So if we hadn't gotten a weather briefing yet, great opportunity to get a weather brief from him. So we know about any adverse conditions, the METARs, TAFs at our airports, winds aloft, if there's any NOTAMs, TFRs, or anything like that, all the things that are included in a weather brief. Or we can say, that's it, thanks. And then, so we filed a flight plan at that point. So other way you can file a flight plan is you can use 1-800-weather brief. In the description, there will be some information on how there'll be a PDF on how I fill out the aircraft information for this 172, but you can look at it, you can fill it out yourself because you got to have one to be able to file a flight plan. So I just did a pretty similar thing. I just filled this form out, and then all you have to do is down here there'd be an option to hit file instead of this option that you see here, because I already filed this flight plan a couple of minutes ago on accident. To test it out. So you can actually activate and close flight plans on 1-800-weather brief, or the method we normally use is we call up a flight service station frequency. So on one of my other videos, I had some stuff about how to file a flight plans on 1-800-weather brief, and I think I actually talked about activating flight plans as well, but we'll kind of go over it here again. So we filed the flight plan, but now we've got to activate it. So it's even if we don't take off, it's fine. It's not automatically activated at whatever our proposed departure time. It's not activated until we call them up and tell them, or until we use 1-800-weather brief, hit activate, or use the email that they might send us if we have our phone numbers registered. So we filed our flight plan, and now we're in the air and we're going to activate it. So what we do is we just know what our flight service station frequency is. Standard flight service station frequency is going to be 122.2. There might be some other things, so we can look on top of our VORs, look at RCOs and figure out, or look in the AFD to figure out what it is for the airport that we're flying out of. And then we call them up. So whoever they are. So in this case, in Alabama, it's Anniston. In Georgia, it's Macon. So Anniston Radio, Cessna 9160 Hotel would like to activate our flight plan to Selma. In this case, since we filed a flight plan to Selma. And they would go, okay, Cessna 9160 Hotel, your flight plan has been activated. We'd appreciate pilot reports, report any and there's no adverse conditions along your route, yada, yada, yada. And we can just say, thanks, 60 Hotel. So at that point, our flight plan is activated. We can go along on our flight. Once we get on the ground or near our destination, or after leaving out of our destination, if we just kind of fly out a one-way leg and we were going to fly home anyways, we just didn't want a flight plan for the second half, we can cancel it at any time over that radio frequency, or we can call 1-800-weather brief, kind of go through the same steps that we did to file a flight plan, except whenever they ask, what can I do for you? We tell them we'd like to close our flight plan, and obviously tell them what your aircraft identification is. Or we can use, the website, or we can use any links that our email might have on closing that flight plan. So the key with filing flight plan, we got to file it. We can file them in the air, actually, just as a note, but generally I avoid that. That's just a lot of talking on the radios. So we got to file flight plans, and then we got to activate and close our flight plans. If we do not close our flight plans, that is whenever the power of a flight plan comes into play. So, most of the time, we just accidentally forget to close our flight plans. And so, the steps that they take aren't important. But, let's say you actually didn't close your flight plan because there was a problem. You didn't make it to your destination. So, likely scenario is either you crash or you had to land in a field, you don't have cell phone service. So in that case, they would start doing rescue operations. They might send the sheriff out to the airport if it's a small airport. If somebody, works on the airport, they might call the airport authority and get them to look and see if they see your plane on the ramp. And then it's just going to kind of progress from there. If they can't, they'll call you on the phone. And that's actually the first step. And they'll see if they can get in contact with you. Let's say they can't. Sheriff doesn't see your airplane. They might give it some more time. But at some point, they're going to start looking for you. And hopefully, they could use that to find you. Maybe you're stranded out somewhere. And they're able to find you that way. And that's the power of a flight plan. So we've always got to make sure we close it ourselves if we forget to to file the flight plan. All right, so let's see. Now we've talked about flight plans, and now we're going to talk about flight following. So that's a flight plan, and now we're going to talk about flight following. Two completely different things. So what flight following does is we can have easy traffic avoidance in a way. They don't guarantee it, but they will let you know about traffic, and it's easier to fly through different types of airspace. So for out of Tuscaloosa, who would we talk to is Birmingham approach and departure. So approach and departure, they're the same people. I don't entirely even understand the philosophy behind when is it approach, when is it departure, to be honest. But so you can kind of always use approach. I guess you would really mostly use a departure if you're actually leaving out of that airport. So if you're flying out of Birmingham, then you would say departure. It kind of makes sense if you're flying out of Tuscaloosa and you're departing Tuscaloosa, you'd talk to them. But they just don't treat it that way. Sometimes you'll call them Birmingham departure and they'll respond back with Birmingham approach. Or you might be talking to a center, like Atlanta Center. So like Charlie class airspaces, they're going to normally be an approach and departure control for some area. And then in the middle ground, whenever there's not really a Charlie class airport around them, then they're going to revert to centers, which typically belong to Bravo class airports. But approach and departures and centers, they're all going to be the same thing. They're just going to have a different name. They all do the same job. So if we want to get VFR flight following, what we've got to do is we just got to call them up and let them know. So we don't have to file anything beforehand or anything like that. So what you do is you just call them up. An example radio call would be Birmingham approach, Skyhawk 9160 Hotel. And notice how that's different than we normally say Cessna. So anytime you're talking on the radios, you can either say your aircraft type or you can say the first letter. So in America, that's N. So it's November for N. In Canada, I think it's a C, and every single country has that. It's why a lot of times we don't say the November because it's just not important because every single plane in the country. So you can either say November or the aircraft type. A lot of times we say Cessna, but we could also say Skyhawk because a Cessna 172 has a nickname of a Skyhawk. And the advantage of saying Skyhawk on whenever we get flight following is that they already know we're a Cessna 172. Otherwise, they're going to ask us. So you can either say Skyhawk all the time, or you can just say Skyhawk whenever you're talking to flight following. It's your choice. And if you just say Cessna, they'll just ask you what aircraft type, or we can just mention what aircraft type we are. So the key with approach and departures is they're really busy, so always get their attention first. So Birmingham approach, Skyhawk 9160 Hotel. Let them respond to you. It might take a couple of calls. Once they respond to you, then we can give them a bunch of information. So what we want to tell them is where we are, what our altitude is, what we're climbing to, and what we want. So if we said Skyhawk, we don't have to worry about telling them that we're a Cessna 172. So whenever they respond to us, we can say we're 5 miles to the east of Tuscaloosa at 2,200 for 3,500, would like flight following to Sylacauga. So I just tell them my distance from some point, and then my direction from that point. I tell them my current altitude, my altitude I'm climbing to, and then what we want. So we want flight following to whatever airport. Then they'll respond to us. They'll give us a squawk code. They'll say something like squawk 5321. We say 5321 60 Hotel. We put it in our transponder. And then a couple minutes later, they should say radar contact 8 miles to the east of Tuscaloosa at 3,300 feet. And so then we have flight following. So all we got to do at that point is just keep our ears on the radios. So as we're flying along, we might pass through different people's airspaces. So, if we fly out of Birmingham and we're going to Sylacauga, I think we stay through Birmingham the whole entire time, but we swap to a different frequency for them. There's just different antennas for different frequencies along the all along the country. So sometimes they might get you to swap. Sometimes it's just sector problems. So, one person works, west of Birmingham. Another person works west of Birmingham. So at some point they get you to swap. And so a call that they tell you to swap, they would just say Cessna 9160 Hotel, contact Birmingham approach on 123.8. So we just repeat back Birmingham approach 123.8 60 Hotel. And then we can just call up whoever they told us to. So the person that they swapped us to already knows about us. So all we got to do is just give them a little bit of information, like our altitude is typically the standard thing that pilots report. So you could just call them up, Birmingham approach, Cessna 9160 Hotel, level 5,000. If we're level 5,000, I guess that wouldn't apply for VFR flight following, but maybe 5,500, something like that. So all we got to do is check with the altimeter, and altitude, and then they'll give us an altimeter setting back. Always repeat back the altimeter setting. So they'll say, Birmingham altimeter is 3020. And so we just repeat back 302060 hotel. And we keep on flying with them until we get near our destination. Whenever we get near our destination, they might tell us something like, your destination is, to your 12 o'clock, 10 miles, report the airport in sight. They might tell us, hey, let us know whenever you have weather at your destination. So you just comply with them. If they don't mention anything about your destination or your weather, just whenever you have the airport in sight and you want to cancel flight following, you can just call them up and say, Birmingham Skyhawk 9160 Hotel, we'd like to cancel flight following. We have the airport in sight. And they'd say, squawk VFR, maintain VFR, frequency change approved. And then at that point, we can put 1200 back in our transponder. And then we also could swap to our Unicom frequency. So you just want to let them know whenever you have the airport in sight so you can return back to whatever other frequency. So you've got to stay on whatever frequency they gave you until they tell you can swap. Either, swap to a Unicom or swap to some other frequency. Because otherwise they're going to wonder, hey, what happened to this guy? Maybe it's some type of issue. So the benefit of getting flight following is that they'll tell you about traffic most of the time. So they can let you know, hey, there's another aircraft, at your 12 o'clock flying opposite direction, 1,000 feet above us. And that way we can kind of keep our eyes out, and it's a little bit safer that way. They don't know about all traffic, but they know about a decent amount to where it makes it a little bit safer, especially if you're flying in busier airspace that is not yet controlled more than Class Echo airspace. If it's just Echo, yeah, it's controlled, but, there's really no talking requirements. So it's, quasi-controlled is how I like to look at it. But, it's nice for flight following. If you're going to fly through like Bravo and Charlie airspace, it makes it a whole lot easier, especially Charlie airspace. All you got to do is just keep on talking to whoever you're talking to, because you're probably already talking to whoever owns that Charlie airspace. So, if you're flying, from here to Birmingham, if you get flight following out of Tuscaloosa, you don't have to worry about whenever you break into Class Charlie airspace, because you'll have already been talking to them. And you qualify, and that satisfies the two-way radio communication requirement for entering Class Charlie airspace. If you're flying into Class Bravo airspace, it makes it a little bit easier. You don't have to call them up on the outside, but you do want to make sure that they clear you to enter Class Bravo airspace. So that's just one thing you got to be careful of. So the benefits of flight plans, going back to the beginning of the video, is that you can, if you don't make it to a destination, somebody can start looking for you. Benefit of flight following is not having to worry about airspace quite as much, and then also knowing about traffic. So that's the difference between flight plans and flight followings. Not every single flight we will file flight plans. Not every single flight we will get flight following. But whenever it makes sense and it's good practice, we will do both.